Real Artways is a proud participant of the Science on Screen series. Thank you to the Coolidge Corner Theater and the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation for sponsoring this series and bringing science-based programming to cinemas across the country. Without further ado, please enjoy this roundtable discussion around M.C. Escher's Journey to Infinity, where we discuss the intersection between mathematics and art.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Real Artways web series. And here we are, and we're here tonight to be discussing the documentary about M.C. Escher that has been up on the Real Artways virtual cinema. But that's really just a springboard for us, because the purpose of tonight's discussion is to be looking at the intersection between art and mathematics, something that is ever present in all of Escher's work. So what we're bringing you here tonight is, well, it's a roundtable discussion, sort of. What we have is, we have four very talented, interesting people that are going to have a conversation. So I'm gonna propose a fiction, everybody. I'm going to propose a fiction. And this fiction is that we are not sitting behind computers in disparate parts of the world or the country. That we are, in fact, all together around a table, and we've just watched this film, this documentary on this wonderful artist, and we are going to have a discussion. Now, who we have tonight are four people representing three very different fields that you do not interact with necessarily. We have visual artists, we have musicians, we have a musician, and we have a mathematician. And I'm going to throw my influence on my sleeve right now, and this is just totally stolen from the fantastic book Goldberg, Bach. And the thing that I love about this idea is that we're going to be finding and trying to explore the element of mathematics that ties all of this work together, which is what we see with M.C. Escher. So in a moment, we're going to start this fiction and we're going to have this conversation just like we were all here together. But before we do that, of course, there is some formality, and I am going to introduce our speakers for tonight. And to begin with, I'm very happy to introduce Rachael Elliott. Rachael Elliott is a versatile performer who is active in classical, new music, and improvised rock and pop. She's best known as the founding member of the genre-bending music group Clogs. Miss Elliott may also be heard on recordings of The National, My Brightest Diamond, and Thomas L. Reed, and in films including Turn the River and Colony. Now, Rachael, I know that you work in traditional classical chamber music and indie rock bands like The National, and the Clogs, where the group that you perform in most, is somewhere right in the middle, somewhere between indie rock and classical music. And if you could just introduce yourself now.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Ian, and thank you, Megan and Real Artways for having me in this wonderful panel you're about to meet. As Ian said, I'm a bassoonist. I play the bassoon, which is one of the larger woodwind instruments, and it's most often seen in orchestra, but I have found that for me, chamber music is where I feel at home, playing in small groups where we design lots of interesting projects, from new music to classical chamber music, to even music that borders toward rock and pop. So I have been having a great time watching the film and thinking about reflecting on the role of math, especially in music, which is extensive. And I'll just finish by saying that a friend of mine, Cynthia Heward up in Vermont, has a wonderful quote that inspired my portion of the talk, which is, "Music is math in sound."
Excellent. Thank you so much. My next introduction is Dr. Timothy Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg is an associate professor of mathematics at the Donald and Helen Short School of Mathematics in Computing Sciences in Lenore Ray University in Hickory, North Carolina. And Dr. Goldberg, your mathematical interests are primarily in geometry. Thank you so much for being here and being our resident mathematician.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Also, no one on earth has ever gotten the name right the first time. It's Rhine University. 100%, nobody ever. So you're in very good company. Yeah, so I've been a professor at Lenore Rhine for the past 10 and a half, almost 11 years now. And classically, my doctoral research was in differential geometry, which is where you study geometry using rates of change. So things like how much is a shape curve, which is about how much directions are changing, and how much things change, that's all calculus. So this is calculus and geometry. And more recently, really since I've been a professor, my work is inspired by work with students, which often takes the form of mathematics inspired by recreational activities. So games, art, music, things like this. And yeah, I guess my main, if I have a motto or like one thing I want to preach, it's just that mathematics is a human endeavor. It's a human activity. It's not handed down from on high. It's something we do and create and explore.
Excellent, thank you so much. And last and certainly not least, I would like to introduce Chris Klapper and Patrick Gallagher, who collaborate in multidimensional and large-scale multimedia to explore new technologies and use them to express immense ideas on a human scale. They are currently the 2020-2021 Artists in Residence at Fermilab, National Particle Physics and Accelerator Laboratory. Now, I am relatively familiar with the concept of artists in residence. And I'm used to them normally in, say, a gallery space, or I met a wonderful artist who was the artist in residence at the Grand Canyon. But I've never thought about an artist in residence working and being inspired by a particle accelerator before. So that's pretty wonderful and exciting. So welcome.
Unbelievable experience.
Incredible place, incredibly inspiring in so many ways. Our work, we're a collaborative team, and our work has come from developed into where we started seeing data and information as a point of inspiration, and using the data and ways to put varying pieces of that together to tell different stories in an artistic or poetic way. And over the years, our different projects had really led us into getting more and more that data. We started finding our interest going to mathematics, where we really were discovering that as the data and math was the language of the universe.
Like as Tim said, I mean, it's something that we're creating, but the more that it's created, it is this language that that as we explore, or not we, we're just the translators of what we're seeing. But the things that we're learning at Fermilab, which is these physicists, as they're on the cutting edge of science, like this bleeding edge of technology and science, and everything that they're doing, they're creating more language along the way. It's this mathematical language, and it's just so inspiring. And we've had this incredible opportunity to work up close and personal with physicists, and it's kind of like this doctorate degree in this very short amount of time, where we get to learn, and have 2-hour conversations with these physicists to find out exactly what they're working on right then and there. And it's and then they'll explain it to us. And if we don't understand it, it's it's just opened our eyes to this whole new world that we're all living in, and we don't really necessarily know we're living in it. But, they're pulling the curtain away for us. Oops, I've kind of disappeared. Sorry.
Disappeared.
And given us this view that it's we already started creating work from it, but we're realizing that we don't even know the body of work that's going to come from this experience, because, you know, just having this knowledge, we're still unpacking it, and it's opening up a whole bigger avenue for us to start moving in, which is really exciting.
That's fantastic. And I can't wait to hear more about all of that work here in this next hour. So the thing, of course, that brought us all together was this film on MC Escher. And one of the things, and we're going to use this film as a springboard where we can talk about the movie, but we're really going to use this as a way to jump off and really just talk to each other. So the first question or note that I'm going to ask is something that I found really interesting in this documentary were those moments when Escher would discover mathematics in the natural world, whether he would start looking at the architecture in Spain, or whether he would, or when his brother showed him crystalline structures and he would start seeing the repeating patterns. And I thought that was a really dramatic and profound moment that Escher describes in his own words. What did you guys think? Did that resonate with any of you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, like, we discovered mathematics as a point of inspiration, similar to how Escher did, you know, where like we had this one trajectory, and then all of a sudden, once we saw this connection, it turned us, and it was actually, you know, when we were watching the film, it was this amazing moment. We're like, oh my God, we're on the same path that how he explored it and how he opened up to it. And so it's exciting.
His challenge on trying to find the human element of infinity, and because the mathematical side is incredibly beautiful, but not a lot of people can gravitate and understand and get into the mathematics. And he, by his work and by his selection of subjects, really made it so people could understand, and it visually told that story, of incredibly complex story of just infinity in itself. Is just I don't know, as a mathematician, you know, I mean, infinity, as from what we've been reading on the math side, is just it really, I don't know, it goes, how do you describe that?
It's not a tangible thing. You can't ever get to infinity. It's just a concept. So to have like Tim with the birds behind you, I mean, like, that's a great way to express infinity, because it's just the birds go on and on and on and on.
Yeah, Dr. Goldberg, you're nodding your head. How does this resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so is infinity something we can't put our fingers on? I'm not sure I'd agree with that. One of the cool things we can do is, you said the birds going on and on, right? We can have it going on, and we can make infinity a thing if we imagine like taking all those birds and wrapping them around a circle, and wrapping them in such a way that like the birds, the distance changes as you wrap them. And so infinity is like that extra point on the circle.
But doesn't infinity between the birds then is the same size?
Well, that's a whole different, yeah, it's all over the place, as you were saying. I guess that point struck me a lot when you were talking about Ian, because he found all this mathematics in nature. And what really struck me was that he took that and then he played with it in his work. He found the architectural patterns, and his early work was about tessellations, where he was just same picture, wallpapering a thing. But some of his later work, like circle limits, I think is what I'm thinking of, where he has, it's still that, but they're shrinking and changing shape to fit together. He's playing with ideas of distance, of infinity, of reality in the ascending, descending. He's playing with it. He's exploring. And that's what I love about that. If he's ever, anytime he was like, well, I'm not a mathematician, I'm thinking, you're much more a mathematician than I think you're giving yourself credit for, because you are taking this thing and saying, well, what if I do this? And then studying the consequences.
Yeah. Also,
as you said, he's doing this beautiful work which embodies so many ideas that have been sometimes dryly described in mathematical, equations and functions and stuff like that. And we get so stuck, I think, on the math is equations and being good with numbers and doing this. And it's so not. What's drilled into us in school are like the strength exercises or like practicing your dribbling skills for soccer or basketball. It's not the game, but it just helps you get to a point where you're better at the game.
Thank you so much. Rachel?
I was also struck by that that scene at the Alhambra where he's seeing these introduced to the Moorish tiles and mosaics for the first time. And he said, I think I have the quote more or less from the film, he said he saw it as an extension of his own experiments with trying to equalize a subject and its background. And I thought that's such a beautiful way of putting it and describing it. And of course, he pointed out that the Moors were not allowed to, Islam forbids representational forms. So he really felt that recognizability was very important. And I think that ties into the naturalistic, his love for nature comes through with so many of those clips. Another thing maybe we'll talk about later that struck me in general was his comments about limitations. He had opinions about color. He had opinions about that it was preferable, that he really enjoyed sketching Rome at night because then all the Baroque excessive ornamentation kind of dissipates. So I thought the concept of limitation is so important for artists in general, visual, musicians, theater, everyone who composes, we work within constraints. And that gets into form and detail as well. But.
Well, Rachel, why are we saving this? Let's talk about it right now. What are we holding back for, everybody? Rachel brings up a really interesting topic, the idea of mathematical limitations and how that affects art and the natural world. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Actually, Tim, you said something that I thought was a really good thing. The math that, that's taught in school when we're, in growing up, and it puts people off of it, and they think they're like, oh, I don't know anything about math. I don't like math. I don't know. Because when we talk about how our work is inspired by math, they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't need to know. I don't want to know. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get it. And it's such a shame because it is such a beautiful, once you get to know it, get past that fear, it really does open up. And I think that's one of the things that Escher really, as Patrick said, it's like put the humanness into it, to take these esoteric things and then put this thing that opened it up to everybody, which I thought was a really incredible.
Yeah, I think on that comment though, the mathematics that we're introduced to in high school level is just it doesn't compare to what's happening beyond that, and it's such a huge world beyond that. And I think one of the really interesting things, mathematics is, especially in like pure mathematics, is leading so much. There's so many things that were being done in the 17 and 1800s where some of these equations are just starting to find an application. Yeah. So that's really fascinating. It's like mathematicians are really ahead of everything.
School's putting a limitation on it.
It's a weird, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was a quote that I heard once, is that at some point, you will get to a point in mathematics when the equations stop making sense. And that's when math gets sexy.
Huh. So it happens all the time, right? Like if anyone ever tells me, oh, math is I found it really hard. I say, yeah, me too. Yep. Or I'm really confused by it. Yeah, me too. Holy moly. But that's part of the challenge. The more confused you are, the more when you finally figure it out, you're like, whoa, all right. There are ways to make the learning of the mathematics more enjoyable, but also more reflective of what Patrick was talking about, like the real math and stuff where you're being creative. People don't usually associate creativity with mathematics, but gosh, golly gee. And there are ways to do it. So one of the really cool things that a lot of communities have is math circles, and a math circle, and there are math teacher circles also. And it's sort of a group of people, so it can be for mostly students, or it could be math teachers at any different level, and they get together, and there are certain curated, really interesting math puzzles that they just work on for a while in groups by themselves, and then they discuss it and sort of in a circle. But they're getting to see this this creative aspect of just working on something for fun, not because you know it will train you to do something.
Dr. Goldberg?
Yeah.
Would you refer to these people as nerds?
You could. I guess
I'm going to assume that everyone out there is laughing at my joke right now. I'm just going to assume.
Not helpful, Ian.
Nerd is the new cool.
Nerds are awesome.
do
Nerd
jokes
is the
have
new
to be
cool.
funny? Because I'm not sure.
Oh,
Yeah, nerds, enthusiasts, humans, yeah, all of those things probably work. Yeah.
Getting back to infinity. I thought Tim said some interesting things about infinity in terms of describing it as a circle. And because I've been puzzling like how I can think of aspects of time in music and come up with lots of examples of compositional techniques of how a melody is flipped upside down, or a melody is played forward and then played backwards, and I can share those kind of things with you. Some of them are played forwards, flipped upside down, played backwards, combinations. But I was having trouble thinking of what is infinity, or is there a musical representation of infinity? And the first things that came to mind were chopsticks, or straight no chaser, or heart and soul, which we get introduced to and then kind of regret in some cases. Although I love straight no chaser, I love Thelonious Monk. I can't get enough Monk. But then what really I kind of landed on, at least for the moment, is that infinity in music could be thought of by the canon, which brings me back to Tim's circle. The canon, or the round, like row, row, row your boat, or more complex ones that repeat and build. That's where I am with infinity at the moment.
fantastic.
In the documentary, the conversation about I think the musician was it Bach?
It was Bach, yeah.
Yes. So I know, I mean, a bit you can hear a lot of the repetitions that roll into each other with that. I don't know if that's the canon, if that's the right term for that, but you can hear that repeating, and then slight variations repeating.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and it even predates Bach. Back to the example I was thinking of. If I may screen share, I can just show you a quick picture of this beautiful score. Because the other aspect of this that was interesting to me, it has been interesting to think about, is, if I can screen share, is the beauty of the scores themselves. Can you see the Guillaume de Machaut score?
Yeah.
So this beautiful manuscript, it's from the mid 1300s, right? They have 3 copies from this time period. I don't know the details. I'm not a medieval scholar, but this song that we're looking at actually is here. Starts over on the left, and then it actually goes backwards. And if you could scroll, zoom in enough, you would see that you play the music from left to right as we normally read it, or you sing it rather, it's sung. And then when you get to the end, the words are written backwards, and you actually read it backwards. So some of those things that you hear in Bach is the imitation. Bach, I don't think, wrote so many canons. Telemann wrote a bunch of canons. Bach, fewer that I am aware of, but he did imitation, which is just repetition. It's just copying. And then he was just masterful at flipping things upside down and playing them backwards and transposing them to different pitch levels. So this little example shows you in modern, on the right side, in modern notation, what's going on at the beginning and end of this short little piece. And he is doing incredible things. Like, for example, the bottom line, the tenor line, is a palindrome. I just show you the first 4 and last 4 measures of the piece. But if you look at C, G, C, 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 G, C is how it goes. And then if you look at the end and work your way backwards, it's the same thing in reverse. And it's perfect palindrome all the way through. Also, you notice there's a flip in the triplum and the cantus lines. When you get to the end of the triplum, at the very end of the piece, that becomes the contus. So there, he's just flipping things upside down and putting them on top of each other. It's really amazing.
Which is perfect for Escher, maybe not so much the musical connection to infinity, but the musical connection to tessellations.
Right.
Because they're the flipping and the rejoining.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I'm going to switch gears just for a moment. Chris and Patrick, could you, I know it will be difficult, could you please try to describe your work? Describe the visual work that you do, so we can get a sense of that.
Well, because we're multidisciplinary, it's not like, you know, we don't do one specific thing. Like we don't do abstract paintings and then just all variations of that. Well, the piece that got us to be connected with Fermilab was we did a 30-day performance of, it was called Everything and Nothing. And it was actually the 30-day mandala that we made out of brown marble. It was 20 feet by 16 feet. We worked for 14 hours a day for 30 days straight. And we actually drew an image of a particle collision that was taken in 1978 at Fermilab from a bubble chamber. We found that image, we thought it was amazing.
We contacted
Fermilab, and that's how we got connected with them in the first place. And there was this whole, and this is our data out of data series, which is the beauty of raw information. So we found this raw data, which was the photograph of the particle collision, and then blew that up. So it was, a lot of our work deals with infinity in scale and time. So we upscaled not just this is a subatomic particle collision. So it's happening, you can't see it. And then we blew it up in scale to 16 feet by 20 feet. And also in duration, because it happens at a femtosecond. Femtometer is the scale. That's the set. And then the amount of time that happens. And then we blew that up in time as well, because it took us 30 days to create it. And then at the end of 30 days, we then swept it away. Just like the particle collision, it happens right then and there, and then it's gone.
And my understanding, and you use traditional materials and tools.
We created our own tools. We made our own
tools for that, yes. And there was also a sound element that went with that. And our projects tend to have, our symphony in D minor projects was multidisciplinary in that as well. Video, sounds, we do projections, we basically work with all kinds of materials. Yeah. We did our show 3-sphere, and that was, we were trying to work with visual representations of 4-dimensional space, something that we stumbled across that was this really incredible mathematical idea that actually has real world applications, and it's being used by physicists where they're going up into the 5, 6, 7, 8 plus dimensions for some of their calculations. Right there, I think that that's just an incredible point to stop and think about, that's, you know, these multiple dimensions are there. So we did a whole entire show that was trying to basically present that with, there's these idea of tesseracts and these shapes that evolve into each other. So we worked with a lot of acrylic and materials and shadow and light. So I guess
that was all sculptural. So where we did the mandala, which was swept away, that the 3-sphere one was a sculpture one. Like the biggest sculpture in the space was a 500-pound invisible sculpture. So it was we carved a torus, but because it was clear, you could only see it in certain angles as the light was hitting it or things were reflecting on it, or if the light was above, then it would just leave the shadow on the ground
All the lines,
and
the
all the
edge.
lines of the edges. So it was clear, except, and very much into this whole different dimensional space where things look different from different angles. Like there's this thing, I'm probably going to totally get it wrong, Tim, and please definitely correct me because I'm not a mathematician, but I think it's Euclidean space, where it's, you have one, you're looking at it at one direction, but when you go in another direction, it becomes a totally different space. Am I correct with that? Or maybe you can explain it a little bit. Well, that's what we interpreted it as.
No, it sounds super cool. I'm not exactly sure, yeah, what to label that. It's really neat. Euclidean space is usually just what we call like flat space, like, you know, this way, this way, this way, and measuring distance the way we usually do. So it sounds like you're like so torus and wrapping it up. And I don't know, I'm not, yeah, I'm not sure.
It's a lot of like the shapes of intersecting, or the tesseract intersecting in multiple dimensions, or the Klein bottles and different things, the topological ideas, some of those shapes.
Right.
That's
So
what
the sort of things
we were
that like
going off of.
they want to live in higher dimensions, and in order for us to see them, we give we'll make structures in 3D that intersect each other only because they're in 3 dimensions.
Right, actually, and our torus was actually cut with planes of plexiglass, and then in order to put it together, it was these flat pieces that then connected to each other. So then it created a new space. So it was flat dimensions that then created, only intersected because it was a new dimension.
Right.
Going up or over,
But then
and then
the,
around,
but then the light play,
and then the light play.
Yeah, yeah.
Now we will of course be providing links to view this work in, I believe, both the chat here and at the Real Artways website. So if I am fascinated just hearing these descriptions, but of course you need to see them.
Yeah.
So we will be providing that.
But I mean, I think it's interesting. So we were at one point talking about limitations.
Yeah.
And I think that you know, that I think for any artist, musician, you know, you have to have you have such a palette of materials and processes, and with music, with sounds, you know, if you don't have limitations, you have white noise. And really, if you think about it, it just becomes there's too much. So a lot of what artists and musicians and maybe mathematicians as well would be to, you know, really to focus in on something. And a lot of what is great about art is what is left out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going back to Escher, his woodcuts and his early work, also about like in Rome at night, kind of like just getting into just these sharp contrasts of light and dark, you know, like that was, he had said that's a setting parameters up like that really allows you to then explore so much more once you have that in there. And I think that every artist does that, in whether they know it, realize it.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, you're nodding your head at that.
Oh yeah, limitations are so important. I think I did pull that picture because I thought it was so beautiful from the film as well. See if I can get it to show for the people who haven't yet seen it. If you haven't, go see the movie.
At the Real Artways website, in our virtual cinema, you can watch this film.
And this is the picture that Tim was just referring to. And in the film, he was saying how much he enjoyed drawing at night, and you can see the kind of flattening of detail in a way. I think you still get perception. I mean, you still get depth, a sense of incredible detail, but at the same time, it's not like looking at a Gothic cathedral, I think.
Yeah, there's something that struck me while watching the film is there was an element of almost Escher doth protest too much sometimes. I mean, he's always saying, well, I'm not really an artist, I'm a mathematician, and I'm not really a mathematician either, and he kind of downplays his intersection in both worlds, but also he talks about his work as purely cerebral and calm and quiet. But yet when he then talks about it further, it's full of romanticism. There's so much romanticism in his work and in the way he talks about math. I don't know, what do you guys, is math romantic? I've already called it sexy before. In the way that it interplays with the natural world. What do you guys think about the way he talked in such romantic terms about math and nature?
Yeah, I definitely was hearing that when he was describing the flowers, both the beauty and the simplicity, just and that sparking his realization about how incredibly complicated it was. He described not being able to draw a rock because there's nothing to hang on to. It's just there's no form. It goes in all directions, and how difficult these. We look at some of the examples from the film, and they looked kind of simple, but from his perspective, they were not at all simple. They were incredibly beautiful in their simplicity.
Absolutely. When you're talking about, Tim, you were about to say something?
Yeah, sorry, I did not hit the unmute correctly. Yeah, when you're talking about the example of the rock, and if he looks, the closer he looks, the more complication he can see, and the more intricate design and all of that. He can also, we look at it and we say, well, it's a rock, it's not that hard, but it's a matter of perception and a choice of limitation of where you decide to cut the line and say, I'm going to represent it this way. And it's such an important part. I was earlier today talked by probably my favorite mathematician. She's one of the people I want to be when I grow up, named Eugenia Cheng. She was a full-on major big deal math professor at, I think, Oxford. I might be screwing it up. She now is the scientist in residence at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which again, you would not traditionally think, oh, a mathematician it's like the reverse of Patrick and Chris, right? Science experiment, do you need an artist in residence? Big art institute, do you need a scientist in residence? She does incredible stuff. And one of the things I've heard her say before is that mathematics is she starts out by saying it's the study of things. And then she says, but not just everything. It's the study of logical things. But it's not just any study of logical things. It's the logical study of logical things. And most things in this world are not strictly, purely, absolutely logical, so we abstract. We choose which details we'll focus on and which we'll leave out. And so in the rock, you can have this much information, or you could go deeper and deeper and deeper. It reminds me of the example of coastlines. You can go on Wikipedia or something and ask, how long is the eastern coastline of the United States? And there's a number there. But it's also true that if you zoom in closer and measure more carefully, you'll get a bigger number because there's all these nooks and crags. And if you zoom in closer and use a smaller ruler, you'll get a bigger number. And so it's all a matter, reality isn't this pure abstract thing that we analyze mathematically, but gosh, can we model it well? We just have to choose which model to use at a time.
I think that right there is, that where Escher was talking about looking at the buds and the flowers and the different elements. One of the things that is in our work a lot as well is this trying to express this idea of scale. What you're talking about with the coastline, and that you keep zooming in, and it just keeps going on and more infinitely large the more you zoom in. And that's the thing that I was surprised to learn about, how much he was taking into where fractals and repetitive formulas that Mandelbrot
I
sets,
was just thinking.
and how the more you zoom in, they keep replicating and keep replicating. And one of the things that we're learning with our time at Fermilab is, all of these patterns, sound waves is, there's cosmic waves, there's cosmic radiation, but then also it keeps going down further and further to like the molecular level, and there's a sameness. It may not be the exact same thing, but when it gets down to the subatomic level, there's frequencies, and it's sort of like this Mandelbrot set of thinking, that idea of fractals, that is just there, always there, on the galactic scale down to as small as we're able to see.
Rachel, please excuse me if I'm stepping out of my lane momentarily. When you're talking about that, it makes me think of Bolero by Ravel, and that infinitely repeating patterns that all bleed into each other. It's one of that's what I started thinking about when you said that.
And I just kept hearing pattern as well, which is a building block of most, not all music. Some music will strive against the regularity of patterns, especially a lot of contemporary music. You'll find, I was trying to see if I didn't bring any examples exactly of that, but I brought some examples of patterns. If anyone wants a little minute musical break, or we can keep chatting. Okay, I'm gonna do the screen share again, and let's see if it works. This is, I was thinking about time in a lot of different ways, of course, and this is a piece that my friend Padma Newsome, who's the main composer in Clogs, wrote over a decade ago now. It's called Red Seas, and I just was interested to look at the pattern at the smallest level. If you look at the top line, we have da 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 dee da 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 ba bum bum. Very simple, bum ba bum ba bum ba bum bum, over and over again. So that's a little tiny microscopic pattern that gets repeated a number of times, and then there are different sizes to the interval. The next line down has da 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 dum ba ba da da dum ba ba da da dum ba da 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 dum. Sorry, I will stop singing it because that's no good. And then the percussion and the bass eventually come jung 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 jung. They have their own pattern. And when you start to overlap all of these different patterns that kind of compete a little bit rhythmically and sonically, they compete for attention. You get what I see when I look at Tim's background again. I see you get this like complex, beautiful, interwoven, it's all working, and I'll play you a quick example of it in a second. Before I play that, I just want to say that we organize our sense of the heartbeat in music. We organize it into groupings usually. And so this grouping is 8 beats in a measure. But when I look at this line here, I'm seeing a 3/8, a 6/8, a 9/8, a triplet, bum ba bum ba bee ba bee ba bee ba bum. And when you hear the percussion part or the bass part, you're going to hear dum ba bum ba bum ba, more of a quarter note feel. It doesn't matter what the meter is or what the technically what's going on exactly for this. I just want to point out that these patterns, they fight with each other a little bit vertically, and they also fight with each other this way as well. They don't fit neatly into the system that he has laid out. I'll just play a little brief example. It starts right before this instrumental section. It's the end of the verse going into the chorus. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Now we get the cellist. Good. I'm going to pause it there. So one more time, I'm just going to do the same short little bit. And just notice as you're listening, if you start to gravitate toward tapping at a certain point, if a certain beat, what beat are you feeling? Go ahead and start tapping your foot or snapping. And just notice, is it staying consistent through this little excerpt, or what happens, in other words? Let's try that and see if we can find the beat. What did you guys notice?
Polyphonic sounds. They're all on their own. It seemed like they had different signatures.
Yeah. Polyphonic that's a great word. Just meaning there's many melodies happening at the same time. Yeah. And it's all through the use of these patterns that repeat and overlap and overlay in such interesting ways that change over time in some cases. As the interesting thing, I think, with much art is you set some expectation. So he set an expectation here, and later you'll change it by just lengthening or cutting off a little bit. It's what I think that's where the really interesting moments in music and art happen, or when our expectations are a little bit played with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That was incredible. I'm going to take a moment right now, and I'm going to all of our viewers who are watching this right now, if you have any questions, we have a little bit of time for that right now. We have two amazing visual artists, a musician, and a mathematician, all at our disposal. So if you have any questions about the things that you've heard tonight, if you look towards the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A section. And please feel free to ask your questions there. I'm just sending out to the group, but before those questions come in, I have a pretty basic question that I'm going to be directing towards Dr. Goldberg. Now, cards on the table, we've known each other a pretty long time. And I'll tell a very, very short anecdote. When I first got to college at Bard College, I was terrified to find out that you had to take a quantitative test to prove that you understood basic mathematics. Spoiler alert, I do not understand basic mathematics. And I remember sitting on a dorm room floor with Tim, who's desperately trying to teach me to divide fractions. And while that was an utterly excruciating experience, he did get me to stay in college. We're from the future right here. But one of the things that always struck me was your absolute joy with numbers and mathematics. That was always apparent. Where did that fascination and joy come from?
Well, let me start by saying fractions are hard, man. They are, no doubt. Yeah, good question. So a lot of it, my father was a mathematician. He was mostly a math educator. He was a professor of math education at NYU for many years. He retired about probably 10, 15 years ago. So growing up, my dad would teach math teachers and do math. And so I grew up on stories of some were about like baseball players, sometimes other sports players, and also like ancient Greek mathematicians or all sorts of stuff like that. And I went with him to all sorts of conferences of math teachers. By the way, if you've never seen a group of math teachers trying to divide a bill at a restaurant, you should. It's remarkable. It's a very, very long time. But yeah, so I went to conferences and I got to see all of these people pretty excited about communicating about mathematics and doing mathematics. And that, I'm sure that was a part of it, and just so many inspirations along the way. And it never hurts that if you have some, beginning skill with it. But one of the important things that everyone hits is at some point, you said at some point the equations stop making sense and that's when it gets sexy. Yeah, something like that I totally agree with. At some point, all of that rote, annoying math stuff we have to do with multiplication tables and stuff, it's a terrible because it kills the joy for people who struggle with it. And it's also terrible because people who are really good at it later have so much trouble when they have to do something that's not just, I memorized this procedure, and they have to be imaginative. I have it with my students all the time. I don't know what to do, and they freeze, and I don't want to say anything wrong. I'm like, do something, try it. That's what so much of this is about. And so when I got to that point, which happened mostly in college, it was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I like this. It's hard, but I like it because it's hard. And I have to get used to being confused and not knowing what's going on all the time and just being comfortable and still working on it. And then grad school, it hits you even harder. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, the next two questions are going to go to Chris and Patrick. So the first one is simply, how do the nuclear physicists react to the artwork? Do they actively contribute to the creation process?
To our particular art that we will be making? I mean, I get, yes, in the way that they've
influenced and helped kind of build the ideas, but not, excuse me, not a direct, it's not a direct collaboration in the sense of the work that's going to come out of this.
But it's such a creative space. I mean, people think of it, Tim, you just said something that, you know, this idea of like the math shuts people off, but it's really, it's when they get lost is when they should get creative. And that's one of the things at Fermilab, which is pretty amazing. It's like, it's such a creative space because they are going into this uncharted territory. And then they have to be creative in the way that they explore. And that influences, then we're gonna take that, all of that information that they give us, and then we're gonna translate it into art.
And they've been just absolutely amazing. I mean, we have, there was a, before COVID, there was a short time that we were there at the lab itself. And then we also had a lot of Zoom conversations with a number of physicists. And they were really interested and excited to talk about their work and to talk about, because we were, like, as Chris was saying, we were looking to translate this story and something that these people are working on that's absolutely mind-blowing. And but it's really, really difficult to convey what it is. So
we got to be like Escher and take it and put it on a human scale on it.
Yeah, they've been really fantastic with giving us their insight and expressing what they're doing. And yeah, I think that from that we're a lot of really interesting work is coming out, and they're also an incredibly creative bunch out there as well. There are
a lot of artists.
A lot of artists.
A lot of the physicists there are also creating art. There's a gallery there, so they have shows regularly. So while they're not going to be collaborating per se on the work that we're going to create, they are making their own work.
And could you briefly try to explain the Data Out of Data project?
Sure.
Data Out of Data came from, we did a 650-mile trek along the north coast of Spain, and we had this, and then from there we did an artist residency in the south of Spain, and we had this idea to collect all the data along the way. That kind of was the beginning of our Data Out of Data, and this whole series is a play on Dadaism. And, you know, rather than calling it Dadaism, because we're in the information age, we were thinking about the art during Dadaism, which is D-A-D-A, not D-A-T-A. and how it was always just writing the word data, 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 data. And then that kind of like this, and it became this like rhythmic thing of this infinitely going on and on and on, data, 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 data. And then when we started to really think about the way that our work was going into this, showing the raw information, the beauty of this raw information, that kind of spurred this.
I had also a very inspired from Dadaism as well, the typographic and just printed bits of information itself. And so this is when we got into this idea of the poetry of raw information and the poetry of numbers. We've been doing, now we've got our project, Pi Project, is a good example for data out of data. And that is, we've been creating sculptures of pi, the number sequence. And we're up to like the 650th number.
No, like 500, almost 600. So every year we change the sculpture. We're hand creating, either casting or carving every single digit in pi. But the reason why it's data out of data is because every time someone gets a piece of pie, it connects to the sculptures actually online, and it's a map of data. It's a map of GPS locations where every piece is connected all over the world. So when you go and look at the visual map, you see it moving all over, and it will continuously change as it grows. So it's all different kind of data points.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
And by the way, and of course, if you'd like to see examples of this in the chat, there are links that will take you there, and you can also find those at the Real Art Ways website very soon. So I have another question there. Oh, sorry, I guess that one disappeared. So Rachel, where can we listen to what you've been doing? And what projects do you have working on right now?
Right now, I'm more active with teaching on Zoom and getting ready for a couple of shows this Saturday on Zoom. My group in Vermont, Helliand Consort, is doing a half-hour show, very short, but it's meant to be contemplative. It's recognizing that we've been in this pandemic for a year, and so many people have been lost, and their lives have been disrupted, and it's just, we felt we needed a time to have a little bit of communal healing together. And so it's a kind of it's not all sad or slow music, but we do start with kind of slower music and some laments and contemplative music. And then toward the end, we have a couple of a little bit more upbeat, just like refreshment, trying to leave with a sense of having traveled and now heading off in a new direction. So that's the idea for this Saturday. And I can share the link in a moment. And then the next week, 2 concerts in a row on 2 Saturdays in a row. This is like unheard of this past year. I'm doing something locally here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. At my school is Lawn G School of Music, which is affiliated with Bard College. Some of you may have heard of. And we are doing our double reed day. So it's a day celebrating oboes and bassoons, and we're teaching and we're playing. And I'm actually going to play for the first time since September with 2 other colleagues in the flesh with our, negative COVID tests, and knock on wood and do our best. And so it's unreal to think about playing with someone again after September till what's the math there, 8 months, something like that, since I last played in a room with someone. It's just,
we're all in our own infinite loops right now at this point. See, I got you laughing right there. Now, someone asked in the Q&A, is this discussion being recorded and is it going to be made available? Yes, it is. We've been recording this, and this entire discussion will be made available on the Real Art Ways website and on Real Art Ways Facebook. So absolutely, if you missed some of this, or you just want to hear this discussion again, or you want to share it with someone else, it will be made available. And with that, everyone, we're right about at that time. I would just like to thank all of you, Dr. Goldberg, Chris, Patrick, Rachel, for coming to Real Art Ways, because that's where we are right now. Whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, we are here at Real Art Ways. And thank you coming here and having this great discussion. And so I'm gonna make a request that post-pandemic, can we all get together around a real table and have this discussion as well? We'll have some drinks available as well.
Okay.
How does that sound to everybody?
Sounds great.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
yes,
much.
thank
This
you.
is really fascinating.
This has been absolutely wonderful.
Great. And once again, if you want to watch the MC Escher documentary we are referring to, it is at the Real Artways website in our virtual cinema. Chris, Patrick, Rachel, Dr. Goldberg, thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good
Thank you,
night, guys.
everyone.